Now, the thumbnail and the title of the video might seem like clickbait, but they aren't. Why are humans afraid of the voices that sound like us, but don't come from us? Well, in simpler terms, something mimicking our voice. An example of our fear of our own voice might be weird birds, with the way they use vocal mimicry as something to fear, as something the main character fears due to knowing the voice is probably from his neighbors, who have likely died due to the titular villains, the dinosaurs, just trying to survive in a time they aren't used to. A less frightening example of mimicry is probably parrots, a species we keep as pets, as, yeah, that's just the norm for our species. We keep animals as pets. And we find species that mimic our own voice interesting to keep as pets. Take parrots. As I've said before, they mimic our speech. And as much as we fear it, in some instances, we also find it admirable and interesting that species can mimic our own voice to such an extent that parrots can. But I find it terrifying. Because when you hear your own voice, or something that sounds like it, that's terrifying. Let's use the film Jurassic Park as an example of horror. Just the idea of a velociraptor opening a door. Now, that doesn't seem too scary, but when the raptor is actively hunting you, it seems as if it knows that you're there and it wants to kill you. Imagine how Lex and Tim felt.
Jimmy, what is it?
They were afraid. They were afraid they wouldn't see their families again. And yeah, I know Jurassic Park isn't a horror film. I know that, but did Michael Crichton? He saw and wrote a horror novel. Jurassic Park, at its roots, is something based on horror. That it is not an idea, it is not a concept that it is something about horror. Jurassic Park is a horror movie at its core. It is based on a horror novel. Now, it is far more kid-friendly and family-friendly than the novel, but imagine if it was a one-to-one replica of the novel. It would have been far more horror. Ravens. You know them, the birds that are known as the symbol of death and horror. But there's something about them that you might not know. They mimic human speech. They do it eerily well, too. You train them to say things that are human. You train them to speak, they will speak. But this is trained, this is learnt. This isn't inherently an instinct. They don't inherently want to mimic. They learn to. They learn it as a skill. They learn it as it is interesting to them. Just as it is to parrots. I'm gonna bet the last thing you expected in a video on horror, on mimicry, is seals. Seals are fat blobs of flesh that are just adorable. And yeah, they're in this video because of one that mimicked human speech a while ago with eerie accuracy, right down to an accent. But, I mean, that's just mimicry. It learned how to mimic because it was raised by people, but it was raised by people. That's why it mimics. It didn't learn. It isn't a skill that it was taught. It learnt to do this. It was raised around people that spoke. So it learnt to speak. It was a speaking animal because it was raised by speaking beings. Now we're back at dinosaurs. Yeah, dinosaurs. You heard me right. Like Utahraptor austramazi, Utahraptor, and other dromaeosaurs, which will be explained later down in the video. They might have mimicked human speech. It's not known, there are no fossil evidence that supports this, but you have no idea what T-Rex sounded like. The videos of demonic owl sounds, those are just videos. They are no less real and no more real than the Jurassic Park speak. The Jurassic Park roars, the calls given by the Jurassic Park animals. They are no less accurate and no less inaccurate. the video of Creature of the Night here on YouTube, created by Wobbly Works. It is a great example of how horrifying dinosaurs can be. Another great example of this is Kranouticen. He has recently released an animation called The Shed Incident, depicting two park workers in a shed as they are attacked by raptors. Initially it was more than one, but they are slowly picked off, one by one, until there is one left. It is a display on how even something as wholesome as Jurassic Park, and even though that series has become rather silly in recent years, how its potential for horror has gone no less attended to. Maybe not by the official Jurassic Park and Jurassic World people, but by the fans. Now, I could talk about how dinosaurs could mimic human speech for ages, but humans do it the most. Homo sapien, the wise man. As a species, we mimic each other. We mimic what we hear, we mimic our parents, we mimic other people, we mimic what we learn, we mimic what we teach. We mimic everything around us. We mimic things we don't understand. We are infatuated by things that mimic us. We are infatuated by things that look like us. We are infatuated by things that are just human, but not enough to be human. Now, back to dinosaurs. So, as I said previously in the Utahraptor section of the video, other dromaeosaurs might have mimicked human speech. A personal favorite of mine being Deinonychus. I like to think Deinonychus could mimic human speech because it was a bird-like animal. It was likely the most bird-like of the dromaeosaurs that wasn't a velociraptor. It was an animal I consider something very interesting and very near to me, as it is my favorite dinosaur. These animals are possibly the only creatures I will go out of my way to speak on why they would mimic human speech. It would be for multiple reasons, but to make this video as short as it can be so that I can make it in a day. Yeah, I make these videos in a day. It's gonna be just this little thing on how these animals mimic our speech. Because just like birds do, just like we do, just like seals, just like ravens, just like parrots, and maybe just like dinosaurs like Utahraptor, they might mimic our speech. Now, to end off this video, I just have a little bit of a message for all of the viewers. This mimicry stuff, it's something that'll stick with us forever, no matter how much we try to shake the fear off.